I just wanted to put a note that this is a very raw, very emotional topic for me. I'll be working on improving how I record things from now on, but this is a very raw and real reaction. Today I am going through my parents' divorce record that is online, public, open for anyone to look at. December 8th, 2003, my mother filed for divorce. If my memory serves me correctly, they had already bought the house in the small town next to where we lived. They were starting remodels because it was supposed to be a rent house, and that way it would help my parents fighting, because I remember them talking about how things were bad in their marriage because my father was constantly working. Most of my memories is waking up because I hear him in the morning packing his lunch, and then him getting home late, taking a shower, and turning on the TV. That's really the only memories I have of my father until after my parents' divorce was finally finalized and we had court-ordered visitation. So by that date, 12/08/2003, the second house had already been bought, paid for, and started renovating. See, the hard part about this is I remember what I remember as a child. The dates are on the computer. I remember conversations, and then you have the scary conversations I would always have with my mother, because my mother is a type of person that loves to tell people what she's gonna do. And I remember being the oldest, and I was her only female child at the time, and other people had gotten tired of hearing her talk. So I got forced into becoming my mother's best friend. And her forcing me to become her best friend and hearing everything that you would normally tell a friend and not your daughter or family. Like, I know all about my mother's sex life. Her and my father's sex life, her and every guy she's fucked between here and now. I've got to hear everything about my mother's sex life, and I swear on my own grave I will not do that to my kids. Because that has scarred my sex life as an adult. I had to hear things way too young and way too explicitly, and things I never wanted to know. And that type of childhood trauma, having to hear that about your mother, your father, people you don't know, is not something that you tell a child, because it's terrifying, it's scary. And I lost any and all respect for my mother from a very young age, because everything else told me not to have sex, don't talk about sex, and rightly so. I mean, in 2003, let's see, 93, so I would have been, let's see, let's do the math real quick, make sure I'm getting my age right, because This math in the brain is not always easy. So this was in 2003. 2003 minus 1993. I would have been 10 years old. And by this time, I already knew that my mother planned on leaving my father before they filed for divorce. I knew before they bought the investment house. I knew what was going to happen years before it happened because my mother told me step by step what she was going to do, how she was going to do it, and how I was going to help her with it. I remember being in the shop with my dad. And I would try and remember stuff that I knew Mom liked because I wanted Mom and Dad to be friends again. I never really seen them as husband and wife. They were just always basically at each other's throat, either cold shoulder or screaming, yelling, beating animals, breaking dishes. I mean, some of my early memories with my younger brothers is teaching them how to hide behind the love seat so they wouldn't get hurt when things went flying or they were fighting and screaming and yelling, and it turned into a war zone. And what's really fucked up is that my mother told me within 2 weeks of getting married that she was going to divorce my father. 2 weeks. See, this is the really other kind of fucked up thing about that is my mother supposedly had a miscarriage because they got married because she was pregnant. Well, they had a miscarriage a week into their pregnancy, and she got pregnant with me within 6 weeks of having that miscarriage. So she had already decided before she even knew she was pregnant with me that she was going to leave. And she has told me many of times that I'm the reason her life is so bad, that she never wanted to be with him, and that she had to be because she was pregnant, and that she was pregnant again, which is why she couldn't leave. And I, as a young child, used to internalize that as guilt. This is gonna be very jumpy. I have children coming in and asking for things or needing things or things I have to do throughout the day. But something that I want to start doing is sitting down and going through my parents' public divorce record. I can't see everything and I can't read everything, but I think just the fact that I haven't even gotten past the filing date without a lot of response and a lot of memories coming back is gonna be a lot. So we're gonna take this slow, and we're gonna use this as a healing purposes. I remember helping my dad pick presents out for my mom one year, and I worked so hard because I wanted them to stay together. I didn't want my mother to make us move. We had everything we needed. We had food and water and a house that was warm, and we could run and play. And as an adult, you don't think about child's needs or wants very much. she always told us things would get better, we wouldn't be hearing fighting anymore. And knowing what I know now, and looking back, because hindsight's 2020, after everything I've been through, the only reason that I'm not wanting her to never leave, because knowing what I know now, and the fact that hindsight is 2020, the only reason that I would not wish my mother to not get a divorce is because I now have kids, and because I had to go through this, I ended up finding happiness at the end. But a lot of people don't understand how to find the happiness after trauma and after abuse and after neglect, and having their parents tear their lives apart in the name of it's going to get better, and because I don't want to anymore. My parents messed me up so badly by either neglect, abuse, or their way of doing it. I now have to be on medication multiple times a day so I can retrain myself, my brain, to not become the monsters that they were. Because I actually love my children, and I have to reprogram my brain into a life that's not filled with trauma and abuse and neglect, and I have to deal with those memories so I don't keep them inside, because me keeping those inside is hurting my brain more, and I don't want my kids to have a side effect of my parents' choices, because that's what I am. I'm a side effect. I am a side effect, a pain in their side, and something they wish they never had. So, according to my physicians, I have anxiety, chronic depression, and as of a couple of years ago, after finally removing my mother completely from my life, I was diagnosed with PTSD. So, I am a big advocate for parents pulling their heads out of their asses, actually acting like adults and parents, pulling their lives together, because you are literally becoming a monster and damaging the future because of your selfishness, your pride, and because of sex. And it's really fucked up is that a lot of people are gonna say that statement of grow the fuck up and take on your responsibilities is anti-self-care. Self-care, the word itself, brings back so many memories of my mother neglecting us for hours, days, weeks, even a few months, because it was best for her self-care. So she chose to lock us in vans and leave us in the back of parking lots. She would leave us alone for days at a time with no transportation, no money, no adult supervision. And then the very man that she accused of trying to kill her, and that she had to leave and disrupt everything because he was dangerous. She left us with him for months at a time so she could go fuck a guy in a different country for her self-care. And what really throws people is my mother decided to homeschool us. And the reason why varies on who you ask. I've had to hear why she's homeschooled us, depending on who asks. So, if family asks, it's because they need special attention because they are learning impaired, which I find ironic because we schooled ourselves, we took care of ourselves, and the only time Elena helped us with anything of school, the only time my mother helped us with school is when someone was watching or she thought that she had to because the courts were watching her and that it was still during the custody issues. So I got the best version that I ever had and ever will have of my parents during their long, messy divorce because someone was always watching them. As soon as someone wasn't watching them, they turned into the monsters that I knew. The real them. If my grandparents asked why we were homeschooling, it's because we could have one-on-one time so we could really learn what we're doing. If I asked my mother why we did things at home, I was told, because I don't want to get up in the morning to take you to school. I don't want to have to get up to take care of you to go to school. Out, please. So I learned that we did school at home because my mother was lazy and refused to do anything that she did not want to do. It took me a long time to realize that not all homeschoolers are abusive and neglectful. It's just bad parents. And that's partly why they created the public school system, is to give parents the options to educate their kids above what they knew. So literally public schools were made for poor and dumb people who could not teach their own kids or could not afford to send them to a private school. And they wonder why public school system is failing, especially here in the state of Oklahoma. There is always something on the news about how Oklahoma, especially Tulsa public schools, are just turning to shit. They said most children who graduate will not read past a 3rd grade level. So I understand why people homeschool. I understand why people private school. I understand why people have no other options but to send their kids to public school. But we have to remember the form of education is not abuse in itself. And after a long debate in my childhood, I've decided that my children are going to be privately educated. How do I say this? I basically had a few versions of my mother. I didn't have my mother. I had versions of her. I had the mother that when someone was watching, I had a mother that would do anything that she could, even the smallest of details, to ruin my father's life. I thought she hated him. I thought she wanted to be gone of him. Apparently, she just wants to live her life, making his life a living hell. I do not understand. I have the mother that, when we're at home and she's been away for a while and she comes back. And she's always like almost happy, but also just disgusted that she had to be there and come back. And then you had what we normally saw as a normal mom, the monster. And a big reason of why I choose to medicate and why I am doing talking therapy and I'm going through old records is because that's what I saw as normal. That's what my brain decided that's what normal was. So when I am not constantly keeping myself in check, my normal is my mother's level of monster. So I have to be constantly making a conscious decision to be good and to fight against everything that my parents programmed my little subconscious child mind to. Because children learn more by seeing, hearing, and doing than they ever will by you talking to them or them reading something in a book. And I'm not sure if my husband is ever going to share his story, and I'll have to talk to him about if he wants me to share pieces of it or not, because his childhood and his past is his, and I'm not going to share something that he's not comfortable sharing. But for the sake of our children, I am ready to accept my childhood, to process my childhood, to make sure I don't repeat my childhood into my children's childhood. I choose to be the change.